we have held a bunch of regional sessions now where we've asked people to come together and talk about how some of the ACT tools can fit with the needs of our customer populations, whether it's career center customers, adult ed students, community college students. These sessions, as Sandy said, we're trying to bring similar organizations together to get ideas and generate ideas on how the tools could potentially benefit the career center system, the individuals that the workforce boards and career centers are focused on serving. And so Mark Whitmore was very smart. He went on vacation as we were unable to hook him on a panel. And so what I was forced to do, I actually have put together a presentation to accomplish several of the following goals. One, I want to talk a little bit about how our world is changing under WIOA and where there are opportunities to meet that change and how these tools potentially can play a role in that, at least based on the experiences from some of our early adopters. Two, talk a little bit about some of the strategies that we have gleaned from talking to folks like Mark and his team, New Bedford, the community colleges, adult education, etc. But kind of specific to boards and career centers. So the goal here is really to hopefully get you to think, brainstorm, and then use this small group exercise to talk a little bit about your own organization and how you see some of these tools fitting. I've looked at a lot of the data, so we can log into Career Ready and see all 100 sites. And there are a handful of career centers that have activity, but the lion's share of career centers either are still trying to figure out what's going on and how to do this work and what makes sense, or they are hopefully in the middle of kind of launching some program design work. And so that the point of today's exercise is to support that thought process and give people ideas of how this might fit. Does that make sense? Okay. And I will hope, maybe expect that folks like Mark and others of you who are in the room today who are using the tools, I encourage you to interrupt me and provide your own examples. And I am sure I will call on them as well. Okay. So before we get going, how many of you personally have logged into Career Ready 101? Okay, that's better than I thought. That's good. How many of you have gotten your key leadership together in the board, the career center, or both to talk about low-skilled learners and how to support them with ACT tools? Okay, not bad. How many of you have customers who are either not getting a job or not taking their next step because of reading and writing and basic skills? Right? Pretty much all of us, right? So at this point, we are hoping that the boards and the career centers are working with their regions and their partners to start talking about not only what are you doing in your own house with these tools, but what is the relationship as well to the adult ed partners and the community colleges who've also gotten these tools, all of whom are working on this basic skill issue in their region, right? So I'm going to guess, I know for a fact that North Shore has convened kind of a regional group with all those partners to talk about deployment and implementation. I know that Hamden is launching a regional team to look at those same questions, and they're looking at how referrals happen across those three systems using Career Ready. So there's an opportunity here to actually think bigger than just the board and the career center. But looking at this from a regional perspective is also a key opportunity moving forward, and I hope to illustrate some of those examples. So I just, how many people know what WIOA is? Okay, everybody, So as you all know, we are rapidly moving toward deployment of WIOA away from WIA. And in Massachusetts, we are doing that faster than other states because the governor has asked us for a state plan that is due on November 13th instead of in March. And so it has catalyzed a steering committee that has been looking at some of the issues and key changes in WIOA and what that means for Massachusetts. If you take a step back and you think about what people commonly speak to as changes under WIOA, This is a pretty decent list as you start to look nationally at folks who are analyzing WIOA. The ones in bold are pretty important issues, and in my opinion, the ACT suite of tools, at a minimum, have the opportunity to help us with those key areas. You can make the argument, it could probably help you with all of the areas, but at a minimum, we're going to talk a little bit about working with customers, both business and individuals, as well as credentialing and career pathways. So I'm going to kind of pull out a couple of key themes around WIOA and speak to those specifically. And I've already heard some of the regions that have been using the tools were actively talking about ways to capitalize on the tools in relationship to WIOA. So first of all, one of the big shifts from WIA to WIOA is that the Career Center system is now required and has a priority of service from referrals from our core program partners. That's adult education, that's vocational rehabilitation, so in Massachusetts, Mass Rehab Commission, Mass Commission for the Blind, as well as TANF, SNAP, and CSEP, or older workers. And so nationally, all career centers are looking at how to provide priority of service for individuals with barriers, especially from those core program partners, not to exclude veterans, which has always been a priority area. But in many ways, that sounds nice, but the how does that happen? What are ways to actually think about changes to the system that would, in fact, prioritize populations within the existing resources? It's frankly one of the big debates and issues people are looking at nationally. So I want to highlight three potential hows that we've been talking about through the steering committee with the other core program partners that are pieces that will be part of the state level MOU or the agreements that those partners are working on across those major state agencies. One big area, and I know Lowell and a variety of other career centers have already done this, but really looking at the customer flow and how customers are directed to key areas of service is a big game changer in how they are prioritizing staff time for certain populations. Looking at shared customers, which is a defined activity under WIOA. So if we're getting a Mass Rehab Commission referral, that person is defined as a shared customer and shows up in all our performance measures. And there's an accountability system now around those shared customers. And in addition, I think the ability to utilize tools, whether it's an assessment tool, a remediation tool, or moving people to credentialing, is another way to help individuals with barriers move into a deeper level of service that is not self-service and resource-based. And so I'm going to talk about what some of the career centers have done with ACT tools in these three areas, as well as a few more to give you ideas of how they're doing that, what they're doing. The first area that I mentioned was thinking about, again, taking a step back and looking at who's coming in the door at the career center level, who are the key priority areas in the workforce area. We have overall a declining number of people coming into the career centers. That foot traffic trend is changing and shifting downward. And there is a need to look at, and this is true in the RERES program, but to really identify and develop a pathway for those folks who are potentially job ready, those who need some deeper level of skill, right? Simple ways to think about that. Do they have a work history? Do they have a high school diploma or less? What is their income level? There are a lot of ways in which career centers have thought about segmenting populations and kind of moving them into career pathways and service pathways in the career center. In the area of skill development, especially in our RERES, there's a real focus on the career action plan and using assessment tools for the customer that helps them think about not only their career interests, but their actual work history, their education levels, as well as competencies. And while things like TORC are great for career exploration, TABE is not exactly a great tool for competency assessment that translates to a job or career development. And in many ways, Career Ready 101 is an opportunity to help an individual with a deeper level of assessment around either their next step around employment or a next step around post-secondary. And so the combination of tools that are available to career centers and community colleges and ABE programs offer an opportunity to really think about how to use that career action plan and use that in a specific way for a specific customer base. And again, I think that's what you'll hear in some of the examples from career centers who are doing this work now in some form or some way. And hopefully you can, I spent a lot of time making 50 copies at full-page slides last night, so hopefully you can read this, maybe not without glasses. But one of the ways to think about this, and one of the pieces that we've been talking about is, while we're looking at potentially a new IT system that will handle referrals and will look at customer intake from our core program partners. So again, we know we have ABE referrals, Mass Rehab, MCB, DTA, and DUA. We have people who walk in off the street. Some people come through job quests, some come into a career center. There's typically an orientation process, and some of the career centers are looking at how the career action plan incorporates TORC and Career Ready 101 in order to round out that assessment profile or that plan for an individual or for a customer base. But it also helps them identify who's job ready, who's potentially trying to move right into job placement, and who needs more, right? Who needs to think about HiSET, who needs to think about talking to the community college navigator, who needs to be working potentially through trade, a national emergency grant, WIOA, low income adult, the list goes on, and you have your own specific programs as well. But there's a group of individuals that most likely is going to grow as the economy continues to improve. There's less foot traffic. This is going to become a huge emphasis on assessment and service delivery. So the ability to fit these tools into this service flow is a big, important question, and one that I know that we've heard a couple of career centers already try to figure out and identify. So I've been talking about Fall River, again, North Shore, New Bedford, and others who are thinking about this bigger picture. As you do that, right, you also then have the ability to utilize the Career Ready 101 portfolio with your ABE partner as well as your community college, because they're all using the same tool. So the opportunities to look at it from a regional perspective is something that I think fits the customer flow concept, but also could be very specific to how senior leadership is thinking about customer design in the career centers. One of the pieces that I know Department of Career Services has been talking about related to even just REA-RES is maximizing use of the tools that we have at our disposal and thinking through whether real-time labor market information, basic skill assessment, career exploration, and transferable skills fit for different customer populations as well as service design. So again, from our perspective, we're looking at how these ACT tools fit in this broader deployment of tools that are now available to support job seekers. Does anybody not know what any of these tools are? Yes, HEOL. Help Wanted Online is it's the data set that career centers and boards have to analyze real-time job postings and look at either the employer side of it or the occupational side of those postings. It's also fueling job quests. All those job ads go right into job quests. So does this make sense? Are any of you starting to think about how all of these quadrants begin to fit together? I see some bewilderment and I see some head shaking. So hopefully when you guys get into small group format, those of you who are shaking your head, can share what some of the pieces are that you're looking at internally. So from a customer flow perspective, there's a real opportunity to think about how the tools are really part of a broader service design. So again, as I said, I went back and took the early adopter profiles, which are on the CRI website, and pulled out examples and pieces of what North Shore and New Bedford have been talking about as they've worked on these tools over time. For some of them, a couple of years now. But in the WIOA sense, Brenda and her team have been thinking about how Career Ready and NCRC testing can help them with co-enrollment and outreach to their other WIOA program partners. And they're thinking about that redesign as well. So I think the most obvious use of Career Ready 101, a bunch of you in the room have asked questions about this, is how does the pre-testing or the baseline Career Ready 101 assessments fit in our overall assessment toolbox? And we know now that adult ed doesn't really use TABE. They have their own front-end assessment. Community colleges really have a college placement test. And so several career centers have moved in the direction of not using TABE anymore, but instead using Career Ready 101 as a pre-test to start to help someone think about their training options if they're interested in HiSET, adult ed, community college, or some other training partner in our system. I have heard great examples where, again, I'll pick on Mark, they have looked at redesigning assessment for special populations. They did a lot of work under their DEI grant to stop using TABE, which was a barrier for a lot of individuals with disabilities, but to use CR 101 to increase the number of individuals with disabilities who are moving on to post-secondary. Again, looking at using the pre-testing as part of the career action plan. So as you know, Career Ready gives you baseline scores, but you can correlate those scores to a job. So if someone says, I'm interested in 3 customer service positions in these 3 companies, you can help them assess their reading and math and related skills, either to move into customer service training or potentially job match. It's the only system that has that 2 sides of the same coin around basic skill assessment and occupational profiles. So in some ways, it's also an alternative, and it's a competency-based test that allows you to not only demonstrate for an individual that they actually have the reading and math skills, even if they don't have some of the paper behind them, the credentials behind them, as well as to an employer. So we hear a lot of stories from job seekers who, in all 3 settings, who said, I can't do this. I'm not really college material. I've never had a job. I have no work history. And then they use the Career Ready piece as a confidence builder and as proof of kind of basic skill levels as they're then using that in their career action plan to move on. In addition, I know others have told me that the time on task and the ability to track use of this system is another selling point when they're talking to employers or training vendors to demonstrate kind of the individual's commitment and drive to participate in the program. Dan?
So I think I've understood that WIOA and trade participants who are looking to go into some sort of training need to do some sort of academic assessment. Many career centers have used TABE. We've used TABE. Is it, at this point, is it now acceptable to use the free version of Career Ready 101's assessment as an alternative and an only way of academic testing someone?
So there are 2 issues. So did you hear the question? Can you use Career Ready 101 as, you said pre-post test, Dan, right? And so there are 2 important points there.
Credentialing part of Career Ready 101, right?
So there are two ways to think about this. Career Ready 101 and WorkKeys is not a Department of Education accepted standard to pre-post to show skill gain, right? if for some reason you need to do that, you're either using the college placement test, TABE. In some cases, it may be the vendor or a vendor. What I've heard from other career centers is if they are working with their customer base and training is an option or something they're thinking about, and you know you need a 12th grade reading and math level to get accepted into that program, so a lot of the community colleges are doing this, they use Career Ready 101 pre-testing to get their initial scores, and then identify how far away they are from that gap, if at all. So there's an example I'll share in a minute from North Shore. And so it's more of that, it's that training pathway. It isn't to prove skill gain. Skill gain is through something like work keys where there's a timed test. Career Ready 101 is not a timed test. It's a self-adaptive baseline scoring system. So again, that's been used with individuals where you're not required to do pre-post testing. So we're actually trying to work on a workforce communication related to trade, NEGs, and others to distinguish if and when TABE is still necessary.
Okay. I guess just from my perspective, I'm not a manager of this, and it's a little unclear to me what's absolutely required in terms of that academic assessment. I mean, typically, like take CNA for example, we don't need a very high level, but the TABE gives, say, like a 9th or 10th grade level, and we know our local CNA program is very supportive, so that's good enough to go with it.
Right.
I don't think I'm hearing you say that there's a way that Career Ready 101 can provide us that only assessment, assuming they score high enough.
So in other regions, they've used examples like CNA where they've used CR to identify their basic skill levels and whether or not they can go into that program. And I don't know, Mark, if you want to comment on this or anybody else.
Yeah, when you get into that range where you're going to make the referral to either a proprietary or a college certificate level program, your pre-test results in applied math and reading for information are going to be pretty comparable. There's actually a pretty good crosswalk between the ACT scores and the TABE and some other scores, so that you can get a sense and you can talk with your providers about where those scores land. Where it does get fuzzy, in full spirit of full disclosure, it does get fuzzy at the lower levels where that crosswalk becomes
like third
valid.
grade level.
Yeah,
I mean, if you're working with someone that's a third grade reading level, you've got potentially different pieces you're working on them with. But the pre-testing in CR 101 really starts at third grade and then moves up. So not ironically, the next slide picks off of the North Shore experience to talk about why not TABE and why CR and how they've been looking at that related to ITA eligibility.
Just practicality.
Yeah.
A monitor, what are they going to do with Career Ready 101 tests?
That's what I mean.
That's what people want to know. That's where this is coming from.
A monitor? You mean a lab monitor?
A DCS monitor. DCS monitor.
We've been promoting using Career Ready 101 on all of these areas. When when the Department of Education is telling a vendor that you have to do pre-post, they will only accept TABE. And so that's the mass workforce communication that we're trying to draft so that it's clear what a DCS monitor or a DOL monitor would be following or expecting. But if you're looking at screening for training, you're not providing US DOE, right, with a pre-post test score. North Shore and others have said we're moving toward using CR 101. So at some level, the DCS monitor, other than that example of the US DOE situation, is going to probably just understand whether you're using TABE or you're using some other tool to pre-post test.
That would really need to be clarified.
Yeah.
Sure. And then I think I'm hearing by funding stream, trade versus NEG versus
Well, in our shop, I believe the policy is for any of those areas, TABE is the instrument that's used. And they wouldn't vary from that because that's what they've said and our plan will be used, and that's what the monitor will look for. So until the monitors are told that the substitute instrument is acceptable, I think they'd be reluctant to change.
That's what we're all doing. So, and I think the degree to which you guys are looking at the big picture here and trying to identify new service strategies, you know where we all are, right? So, Dan, you've raised a couple times this question, and that has triggered drafting kind of a draft policy and trying to look at it funding stream by funding stream, so it's that nitty gritty. But I would encourage you to continue to follow up with Mark and others because they've had to look at this very practically, right? It's not just what does the monitor say, there are practical issues as well. Who's the customer base? Who does it make the most sense for? That frankly are probably more important than just the monitor. Mark.
And just to allay the fears, we
You
just
were
get through
monitored?
that quality
Yeah.
assurance review, and the reviewer that came out, we walked her through the process, and she had Julie.
Yes, so yes or no?
So yeah, no problem. They
No problem.
had a great review.
Yes.
So that's good to know, but
Yeah.
there is variation for monitors, and it is important.
Yep.
It has to do with their performance outcomes, Jeff.
Of course.
So nobody wants to fail one, so, you know.
Me either. Again, Alice is pushing using this stuff in the whole REA, RES program. So the degree to which,
But they need to tell us that specifically.
okay. So I'm sure we will, Alice would have loved to have been here today. It's the overall direction, and I think part of it is the comfort level and the use of the tools is something that the Career Center leadership and the boards and everybody's figuring out on their own first. But the only pushback we've heard from you're going to get a hand slapped, is the Department of Education still, they are stuck to their academic assessments, which frankly have no relevance to employment, and we're trying to work on that. Actually, we're trying to push DOE to recognize these tools as a pre-post through WorkEase. But that is really the one area where I would argue there's a regulation around whether you can or cannot use CR 101 pre-testing. And again, I've done my own pre-tests. Hopefully you have too. So I'm sorry, I lost track of hands. Were there other?
And it's okay if you want to take it, it may come up in later discussion.
Mm-hmm.
We've begun to implement that people are taking the TABE locator, and then if the locator indicates that they should have been given an easy, full survey of TABE
Yep.
or a medium survey, we're having them do the Career Readiness 101.
Yep.
The concern I have is if a person was given the full TABE survey
Yep.
of easy level, they're being judged on 25 questions for every area.
Yep.
With the pretest, most of them, it's ending after only 8 questions.
Yep.
Because, they're, I'm just concerned
Are
about.
you having them continue to do lessons, kind of move up in level?
No, right now, we're just
You're doing
using it
pretest?
as a pre-assessment for whether they're ready for training or not.
So, Mark, as you do pre-tests, do you feel like you're limited, it's a faster process, the pre-test? Has that been a
Well,
disadvantage to
one of
you?
my questions is,
Oh, yeah.
are people allowing more than one attempt in the pretest, or is it only, you're just doing the one attempt and judging them on that one attempt?
What we're doing is we're doing that one attempt, and then we're helping them understand what the recommendations on the modules look like, and then asking them to go back and do work on the modules.
So and then they're given an opportunity to do the pretest again?
Yes.
So Kevin's asking, so pre-testing in CR is shorter than TABE locator. Is that too short? And what happens for the individual? Mark's answer is, they do the first pre-test, they take a first shot at it, we counsel them, we give them coaching around what the modules are suggesting for additional practice, and then they go back in, they do the pre-test again, and that has provided enough guidance to then put them into whatever the next step is, right? Practicing in CR, referring over to another program for training or education, etc. Did everybody hear that? So again, we really want to be able to do these small group discussions as well, so you guys can talk amongst yourself, and we're going to do an exercise, I believe, where we are going to identify some of these specific practice issues that you're looking for more guidance on, and the actual implementation question. So I'm going to keep moving, but it's really good to get questions and get your thoughts. So hopefully you had a time to read this. I literally took North Shore's words. I did not write this because I felt like it was self-serving. If I had written words like powerless and empowerment, but this is from your colleagues and thinking about how it is helpful from the perspective of the unique customer group that we're working with. Again, right? We're not the community colleges. We're not adult ed. So other ways in which career centers are looking at using, besides kind of pre-entry to training, is setting up cohort workshops. So it is like any other workshop you may run in a career center. They assign job seekers to the workshop. They provide a facilitator or a coach, not a teacher. This person is not standing up to teach 1 + 1 is 2. They're teaching them about orientating them on the tools, assigning them modules and lessons, because again, there's more in there than reading, math, and locating. There's financial literacy, soft skills suite. It's a huge, maybe overwhelming number of modules that you can assign a customer to. They're bringing them back in computer lab hours with that coach, again, to check in. I know North Shore and a lot of the other organizations use the data tracking to understand whether people are using the system, where they're getting stuck, and then calling on them around the areas where they're getting stuck, kind of bringing them back in. People use the tools at home, whether they have a computer or not. They may be in other facilities using their login. And then they're using that workshop as a way to launch that individual to that next step, whether, again, it's credentialing or potentially going after a specific job. And so it becomes almost a menu offering or a workshop module. I'm going to pick on Greg. I know Greg helped do some of this work in the North Shore. They started to develop workshops that helping job seekers kind of sell their competencies to an employer, how to really use language based on what they've gleaned from the assessment in a job interview, and kind of how to coach job seekers on that. So people have developed kind of a suite of tools around the data and the information you get. Sorry, like chronically ill for 3 months. In fact, some of the career centers are doing these workshops for specific populations. Veterans, people coming over from DTA, older workers, talking to a community college yesterday, been doing work with older workers. But they find that there are advantages to kind of, again, using a workshop approach where the facilitator is available, again, for coaching. Thanks, Samuel. And the group itself provides a motivation and almost creates a buddy system and a mentorship process, a lot like networking, a lot like job clubs, and they are coaching each other. And so that was probably an unintended consequence, but a benefit from that practice in helping to motivate and build self-esteem for the individuals in the process. Again, I took this right out of the early adopter profile online, so you're welcome to see the whole thing. So this is just an example of a real person. A customer came in, she was not really eligible to enroll in a certificate program. She used CR to baseline her skills. The Career Center coached her. She worked in the system. She enrolled in the certificate program, and now she's gainfully employed at the local hospital. So it can be as simple as that, right? As simple as how are you moving people just a few steps forward to take that next step, versus missing out on a whole new cycle at a community college because you have to tape them and then get them into adult education. We are slowly also collecting real people examples as we're talking with many of you. as you are doing your work, I encourage you to send Yasmin any stories on what's working, what's not working, so that we can add to our collection to share with all of you. So again, there are a bunch of career centers that have looked at using the curriculum around soft skills. It's long, it's diverse, there are many modules focused on work behavior, financial literacy, networking, and there's really quite a bit of basic curriculum that then folks have designed services around. Again, community college built out a networking group using the curriculum, one around older workers, one around new grads from the college, almost like a job club, but helping to promote the skill of networking in the job search process. And again, finally, if you've read up on WIOA at all the work around sectors that the boards have been doing, all the work around developing pathways, focus on industry is in fact a solid key focus of WIOA and an expectation going forward around how not only career centers look at developing pathways for customers, but how workforce boards are working with their partners in the region around credentialing and pathway development. You can find a bazillion career pathway models if you Google it. I picked out one where, as you again kind of pull back, there are a variety of places where you can use these gap filling tools to start to help individuals who are trying to get on this pathway, who again are held back by reading, math, basic skill issues, who are potentially coming from partner agencies or coming in through our system that we're looking to motivate along some sort of post-secondary pathway to be successful in the labor market. This is going to look really different region by region. It would look different industry by industry. Figuring this out is part of that's the hard part, but using the tools to kind of gap fill and identify where we're missing supports is an opportunity, I think, with not only Career Ready, but also the NCRC. So I invite you to use that example. So from your career center perspective, you might use Career Ready 101 to get a sense of whether and how far away someone is to go for HiSET. Again, HiSET is very different. It's a high school, comprehensive, many subjects, basic credential. Career Ready, however, can help identify where someone needs to go along the HiSET path. Most of the one-shots and community colleges are using these along in getting people enrolled in credentialing pathways. So instead of screening people out of community college, using it to screen them in by helping them with reading and math, so they're not sitting in developmental ed, or at worst, screened out of a training opportunity. And then finally, a lot of our workforce competitive trust fund grants and other regional models are looking at how these tools can fill that gap to work with individuals who are then going into whatever that grant is paying for, whether it's the new apprenticeship grant, whether it's a sector grant, whether it's an NEG. This again is going after those limited reading and math skills. I think what I've heard the most is the opportunities here are overwhelming, right? There's so much, there are many possibilities, and it really comes back to your organization and your customer need. So employer engagement is another, let's say, banner theme of WIOA. And while we know boards have and will continue to be asked to engage the employer community with career centers and our other partners, there are allowable activities and use of funding for industry partners and sector initiatives. So as regional areas are planning for that work, implementing CR in those activities is another opportunity. Again, planning and going forward. And it has the ability to engage an employer in the way that TABE does not, right? You can work with staff to help a customer, a job seeker, translate their competencies into that job type. So literally, as I mentioned earlier, helping a job seeker use their profile assessment or their credential to sell their competencies to that employer. So I think, Mark, you've told me the vets community has been particularly relevant in this space because they can not only translate skills through TORC, but they can talk about their competencies to employers using the CR information in that assessment tool and kind of sell that credential if they sat for NCRC. In addition, I think New Bedford said that one of the reasons they went after this initially was to determine and talk to an employer about someone being truly job ready and looking at basic skills of that customer. From an employer perspective, you have the opportunity to use the job profiles to speak to an employer about their actual vacancies and the way to help them customize who they're looking for, whether it's a larger job profile that is in the data system that's available to you through CR 101 or through an organizing process that maybe the WIB has underway or the Career Center. But in addition, it actually speaks to job types where things like TABE do not. And so it directly translates into the jobs that that employer has at their own work site. And again, I hope you will hear about this later, but Mark has been doing this with the manufacturing sector and healthcare sector, and there are other sector-based examples that some of our ADE colleagues are doing with employers, financial services, and others around the state. We, Labor Workforce, have hired a new business outreach person. His name is David Muldrew, and he is going to help us champion a statewide employer outreach campaign around what the National Career Readiness Credential is, that it's now in Massachusetts. We've met with several chambers, New England Human Resources. They love this. They love the credential idea and what NCRC is. They know about it from other states, and they want to help get the word out to employers that the opportunity to credential new workers or existing workers is out there now in Massachusetts. But again, you can't do that until we're actually using the tool.
I
Sorry.
don't know if this is the right moment, but that's my concern.
Yep.
The tool itself, I'm a teacher, I see what it does.
Yep.
I can see the computer adaptive model, and my students have worked with it. But the NCRC, that's where my real concern is. And I mentioned this to Sandy because I've researched this.
Yep.
And states that have been using this for 10 years don't have employer buy-in. Not in the private sector. The American Manufacturing Association has totally gotten on board, so manufacturing is definitely in there. But other than that, I'm only seeing government examples. If I go to job sites, Monster, Indeed, anything, and I search by state, Oregon has been doing this for 10 years and they've got nothing. No
Yeah,
buy-in
that's-
at all. That worries me that I'm selling people on a credential that means nothing.
Right.
And there are blogs out there where people are talking about removing it from their resume because it's become a detriment. It's actually a barrier because they're explaining to employers what it is, and it got to be such an issue that people start taking it off. There are whole blogs,
Right.
talking about that exactly and how actually it's a bad thing.
Right.
So
So-
that's my concern right now is the
Is the
NCRC, not the career ready, get people
Yeah.
to the point where they're ready. It's the credential that
Right.
worries me.
So Brenna's saying that she's worried that the credential itself, the NCRC, is either potentially a barrier and it struggles to see examples where states who've been doing it for a long time have large-scale employer buy-in, like you see it advertised in their job descriptions. I've seen a couple states where you do see that, a couple where you don't. I agree with you, the buy-in piece is part of the overall, kind of future engagement process. I can only talk to you about the specific employers I've heard about in Massachusetts, where State Street and healthcare, some of the direct employers that a board or a career center has reached out to, they've done work with that employer to talk about the assessment, the competency, and the credential, and so they've had success with that. The degree to which Massachusetts will potentially someday have, all employers advertising job openings with NCRC on it, that may be a good thing. It might, I don't know. I mean, I agree with you. I think that's something we need to explore and figure out. What do we want the employer community to recognize? I think we're trying to go for we want employers to understand that the credential represents a set of basic competencies that are workplace related, and that they know what that is. If they've got high sit on their resume or something else, that there's a recognition of what the credential is. Seeing it in all job postings, I don't know yet. Maybe that's an important piece potentially, and I don't have an answer for where we should go with that yet. But I share your concern, and it's something that we want to start to work on with a small group of employers who know about it, and then widen that circle. That said, the two tools are very different, right? Career Ready is the remediation side, credentialing is the other side. We may decide we love one tool and not the other. And so that's why this is a 3-year pilot. We've prepaid for about 2,000 credentials. And at a minimum, a lot of individuals will talk about why they value the credential just for themselves in terms of milestones, et cetera. But I hear you, and I share your concern about the employer outreach piece. I think I saw,
From an employer standpoint, I think we can never forget that.
Yeah.
What an employer values is based on an employer's needs and an employer's business. And getting an employer to buy into and value
Right.
any assessment or any credential means talking to them about their needs.
right,
And I can tell you that from working with this when it was WorkKeys in its early stages, long ago in another state,
yeah,
that you have to talk to an employer about what supports them, what they value, and what they're looking for. And we have to teach our job seekers that they also have to listen and speak that employer's language before an employer can value it. Because they're only going to value it from their inside.
yeah. So Cindy's point was when you already know, which is in the broader scheme of recognition, there's also the other yin to the yang, which is that one unique employer that you're trying to work with. You need to continue what you already do, which is talk to them about their needs and how this fits their needs. I think, North Shore, you've often started with employer outreach and kind of brought the credentialing competency piece in as part of the dialogue, not the first selling point, right? So it's been integrated into a discussion about a particular set of employers and how that tool then works for them. I still hear you though on the broad recognition issue and the credential side, and those are both really important pieces. So I would encourage others to check. Now I'm getting a signal from Sandy that the questions are more important, so. Yeah.
You had mentioned that there were some employers in Massachusetts that have gone into it to some extent.
Yeah, they're hiring people, yep.
So we're wondering if there were a list of those employers that might give us some insight. I don't know if it's something that could be used to help get additional buy-in from employers that we haven't been able to access.
That was our goal was to start to bring employers together who have had experience with like peer industries who haven't, and start to talk to them about how this fit together. So I know Jeff Turgeon has been talking to UPS about this. So I'm not ready to just kind of launch a list because I frankly need to respect the local relationships, but that's the direction we're trying to head in. So there's another hand. Sorry.
Is there an established procedure yet to request one of the 2,000 vouchers for an individual customer?
Good question. Yes, but there's a rollout process we're going to talk about in updates in the next section. And there's a whole webinar that we've designed to teach people how to do that, just like we did with Career Ready, sort of how to pull down the tools. Were there other questions about employer-related issues? I just wanted to remind people that you start to hear this stuff and it's like overwhelmed, right? There are too many things, there's so much, there's too much possibility. There's sort of an oxymoron, but it's about your center and your customers, right? You've got to see the forest for the trees. You have to take a step back and say, get your leadership in the room, make sure they know what any of this is from a teacher perspective, from a job, those two teams right inside the Career Center house, and figure out who are we actually trying to help? Who has challenges around basic skills? Or who, they may not even be challenged, but there are a set of opportunities here with these tools, like VETS or something else that we want to capitalize on then how do you design the program, and how do you define the kind of success measures that you want out of the tools. Some career centers are literally doing this in a micro fashion. They're trying this out in a small way, and they're trying to figure out how to grow it in a big way. I think others, I've seen regions, they've literally enrolled over 3,000 people in Career Ready. So we've got the gamut. I will say later that we are starting to look at the data, and we are going to certainly look at who's actually using the tools. Are people advancing in the system? Kind of what's happening? What are the patterns in using the tools? But you need to define for yourself how the tools fit in your program design and what you're trying to achieve for customers. And I think everybody we've talked to says create a champion. There needs to be someone internal who says, I get this, I drank the Kool-Aid, I know where it works and what doesn't work, and here's how I'm going to be the go-to person, I'm going to be that champion. I think I'm the poster child at the state level, but I think lots of other folks internal to the organization have found that they needed to do that same thing.